Good morning, young intellectual munchkins. As usual, a word from your sponsor before we start. If you like what you hear, please hit the share button and send this video or publication to your friends. Share that with them. If you love what you hear, please hit the subscribe button. The subscriptions are free and they help me to do a whole lot more of these. Okay, time to rant. This morning, I'd like to do some free thinking on the book of Samuel. As I've always told you, I ain't no theologian. So, like my musings, I want you to run this one through the prism of, does that make sense? You're all grown now, so you get to make the call. If the answer is in the affirmative, run with it. If your answer is, Dad, I think you smoked too much Mary Jane back in the 70s, then kick this advice to the curb, all right? That said, let's wrap a little bit on the book of Samuel. Let me start with a little background. Every 5 years or so, since I was about 8 years old, I read the Bible from cover to cover. Now, this can be quite an arduous task. Let's face it, there are a lot of chapters that don't initially grab your attention. As a kid, I was looking for the great stories of evildoers getting the beat down that they so richly deserved. So those were the things that I really liked, which is why I gravitated towards the Old Testament. I loved Haman getting hanged on the very gibbet that he prepared for the righteous Mordecai in the book of Esther. I loved how the evil General Holofernes was beheaded by the brilliant and beautiful Judith in the book of Judith. I relished the righteous justice visited upon King Belshazzar for profaning the temple and the writing on the wall in the book of Daniel. And of course, what little boy didn't love the justice visited upon Goliath after he mocked David and God? Those were the stories that I loved as a kid. The Bible is like a giant onion. The more often you read it, the more layers get peeled back. Also, the older you get, the wiser you get. The increased wisdom that comes with age will open your eyes to things you couldn't see when you were young. As you read the Bible, you'll read verses at the age of 40 that you will find to be life-changing. You'll realize that you read that same verse at age 30, but found it to be meaningless then. You'll find verses that are gold at the age of 50 that you simply couldn't understand at the age of 40. The Bible is a veritable treasure trove filled with the wisdom of the ages. You will never outgrow it. Now, all of that brings you to the book of Samuel. Let me provide you with a brief review of the first book of Samuel, chapter 8. So Samuel the prophet was judge over Israel. He got old, retired, and passed his judgeship to his sons. But his sons were not just. They became perverted and began to take bribes. Sound familiar? In other words, they became politicians. So the elders of Israel came to Samuel and asked him to appoint a king over them, just like the other nations in the area. Now, Samuel didn't want to do this because he knew that having a king other than God would bring about a bad ending. But he took the request to God. God essentially said to Samuel, give them what they want, right? So there are blockheads, and they're not just rejecting you, this is God speaking, but they're really rejecting me. So give them what they want, but warn them that this king that they're going to get is essentially going to enslave them. Now understand, I did some serious paraphrasing there. If you want the exact verbiage, check out 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 22. After I read that chapter, I put the book down and started to think about the relevance of the book of Samuel to current events. Let me explain the conclusions that I reached. Freedom is a very new concept. For the first 6,000 years of recorded history, there were no free countries until the establishment of the United States of America. Before the United States, enslavement was the norm. The samurai enslaved the Japanese. Kings and queens ruled over their subjects in Europe. The sultans ruled over their subjects in the Middle East, and the czars over their peasants in Russia. The Indian subcontinent had a class system so brutal that those at the bottom were literally called the untouchables. Heck, the second chapter of the Bible is entitled Exodus, which essentially means escape from slavery. But maybe there is a reason that freedom is not the norm in human history. Could it be that people simply don't want it? Maybe people like slavery. Maybe people like being told what to do. Maybe people prefer the guarantee of a few crumbs in exchange for some freedom. The Israelites rejected freedom in Samuel's day. Samuel told them that the assignment of a king would result in the enslavement of their families, and they chose to have a king anyway. Dig this quote from Samuel. Quote, "The king will take your sons and assign them to his chariots and horses, and they will run before his chariot. He will also appoint from among them his commanders to form groups of 1,000 and of 100 soldiers. He will set them to doing his plowing and his harvesting, and to make his implements of war, and the equipment of his chariots. He will use your daughters as ointment maker, and as cooks and as bakers. He will take the best of your fields, vineyards, and olive groves, and he will give them to his officials. He will tithe your flocks, and you yourself will become slaves. When this takes place, you will complain against the king whom you have chosen, but on that day the Lord will not answer you. Basically because I told you so. The Israelites chose a king anyway, and God sent them Saul. And Saul did everything God predicted above, right? Maybe we're like Samuel's Israelites. Maybe we don't want freedom. Certainly a significant portion of the population has demonstrated that enslavement suits them just fine. A significant portion of the population chose to inject themselves with untested substances because bully governors operating outside the constitutional authority told them to do it. A significant portion of the population happily put dirty, useless rags on their faces because tyrant governors who had no constitutional authority over them ordered them to do so. A significant portion of the population continues to inject their children with untested substances even after it's been demonstrated to be utterly ineffective and potentially harmful. They're doing so because they were told to do so. A significant portion of the population celebrated the job losses and business closures suffered by those who chose freedom over tyranny. Americans have historically assumed that people by nature want to be free. I'm no longer sure that this is true. It's definitely not true for everyone. So let me set forth a flat assertion. My flat assertion is this. I do not believe that freedom is the natural state for a non-Christian nation. I believe that slavery is the natural state for a non-Christian nation. Let me explain. For freedom to exist, a people must be able to self-govern. If citizens are to participate in governance, it stands to reason that those citizens must possess the capacity to reason. They must have the capacity to discern between feelings and facts, right and wrong, good and evil. A virtuous society is wedded to God, and God is truth itself. A vicious society is wedded to Satan, and Satan is the father of a lie. A constitutional republic cannot rest on a foundation of lies. The edifice will collapse from the weight of it. A constitutional republic must rest on a foundation of truth. Since God is the epitome of truth, it must therefore rest on God. Now, that's all theoretical. Let me support that with some real-world examples. We have intellectual elites telling us that defunding police will reduce crime. That's a lie. We have intellectual elites telling us that open borders are good for the country. That's a lie. We have teachers telling little girls that they can be boys and little boys that they can be girls. That's a lie. We have elites telling people that abortion is not harmful to the mother. That's a lie. We have politicians telling us that out-of-control government spending is not harmful. That's a lie. Our Congress just confirmed a Supreme Court justice that could not define the word woman, which of course is a lie, making her a liar. Of course I could go on for pages, but you get the point. A non-Christian nation is by definition governed by feelings. That old 60s adage, if it feels good, do it, is the mantra of the day. Think of those cities in the country that run on that mantra. What are the characteristics of cities like San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and Los Angeles? Look at the voting patterns and think of the characteristics of those who vote for more government control. These people do not want self-governance. What they want is vice over virtue. They'd rather be enslaved by the government in their personal vices than be given the freedom to choose virtue over vice. Samuel was incredulous 6,000 years ago when people chose slavery. I'm incredulous today. Your generation is being asked the same question that Samuel put to the Israelites 6,000 years ago. Will it be freedom or will it be virtue? Will it be slavery or will it be vice? It's our collective call. If this unprecedented 233-year experiment with freedom is to continue, it's incumbent on those of us who love and value freedom to sell our like-minded neighbors on the necessity to engage and to engage now. America's had three major wake-up calls. The first was in 1776 to expel the British and avoid enslavement to King James. The second was in 1861 to expel the Democratic Party in its attempt to continue to enslave blacks. The current scenario involves the attempt by the global elite to enslave us all. Will we choose virtue and remain free, or will we choose vice and wind up like King Saul's minions, or worse, Stalin's minions? As an old British salesman once told me, if it is to be, it's up to me. Peace out, guys. Ciao.